Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Data Scientist podcast hosted by the Tesseract Academy. I'm very happy to have here with us today André, who is the co-founder of Fuse Finance. André brings a wealth of experience from his decade on Wall Street, where he specialized in tech and business services investments. And his deep understanding of the challenges financial institutions face led him to co-found Fuse. So today we're going to talk about finance, fintech, and also what an entrepreneurial journey looks like. So, hi, Andre. I'm very happy to be here with you today.
Hey, Stylianos, thanks for having me here. I appreciate the invitation.
Perfect. So, would you like maybe to share a few words about yourself? I'm sure you can make a better intro than the one I
Mhm.
did, and explain what motivated you to create Fuse Finance.
Yeah, no, so I was born in the US. I was raised my entire life in Bolivia. Uh, I uh, I come from a family that has been in the auto space forever. My grandpa at some point as a hobby had racing cars. My dad has worked in the auto industry for a while, and my first job out of high school was selling cars. I paid for college selling cars, and then I spent 10 years in Wall Street as an
Mhm,
investor. In a way, I've always been close to the auto space and also in being obsessed with speed and definitionally like making processes more efficient is something that has always been top of mind and software is no stranger to that, right? Like everyone likes software that is faster, that allows them to do their things better in a much more
mhm,
reliable way. So in 2020, as the pandemic started, I saw an opportunity to perhaps bringing speed into the fold for some of to the financial institutions, right? Like when you think about the DoorDashes, the Ubers of the world, they brought
mhm,
speed to the process of transportation to ordering food. So I thought, why can't we just replicate the same thing with financial products in terms of like making it easier? And then you kind
mhm.
of understand that there's like an entire architecture that needs to get done, right? So that's that's kind of how Fuse was created, and an utter obsession with efficiency and speed and kind of replicating and cross-pollinating the idea so that, of what I was already seeing in the world and trying to apply it to the world of finance.
Okay, very interesting. And could you say a few words about Fuse, what it is about, and what
Yeah.
sets you apart?
Yeah, we're a loan origination system, right? So we work with banks, credit unions, finance companies, credit funds. What sets us apart is that first and foremost, we empower non-technical teams to do stuff that originally was kind of
Mhm,
kept for like engineers, right? So we
mhm,
allow engineers to continue doing their engineer stuff, but like focus on more strategic versus tactical stuff. And we allow the business teams to to do parts that allow that should have always been on their purview of responsibilities, but just the technology wasn't there, right? Like updating rate sheets,
mhm,
updating some of the rules, things like that. So in a nutshell, to even like take it to a next level of simplification, we're the software that powers regulated industries, in particular lending, to make the decision. So like you apply for a loan, there's an entire credit model, and instead of the in kind of knockout rules they need to classify. Think about it as a list that you go through, check, 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 and then
mhm.
you decide if that person is approved or not. If they're approved, in general, you're probably going to need to make some validations if this person is who they I think say they are, et cetera, et cetera, and then kind of
Mhm.
you will disperse the funds. So that's kind of what our software does.
Okay, very interesting. And if I'm not mistaken, I think no code is an important part of your solution. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
that's
Yeah,
correct.
and could you elaborate a bit upon this? Because I think that no code is rising in popularity
Yeah,
in the last few years, and I believe that AI might also have a role to play in this.
yeah.
And yeah, I would be interested in hearing more about these synergies and this space in general.
Yeah. Yeah, the most important thing is that historically, implementing solutions like ours required a lot of coding, right? So that
Hmm.
meant that passing the knowledge from one system to another required an army of engineers to do that for you. Reality is like we've completely changed that paradigm by virtue of like running implementations in a much shorter period of time, right? And how's that
Hmm.
possible? It's because the technology has gotten better, right? So we applied technology that was used elsewhere, and then we kind of brought it to the fold and like in essence, like what used to take years, it takes just a
Mm-hmm.
few months, right? If not just a few days, depending on certain categories of lending. So that's what low code, no code brings, right? It enables you to shorten the implementation timelines. And if you shorten the implementation timelines, it becomes a much more attractive value proposition for that bank, for that lender, to do it, because it means like, hey, like I don't need to put like a ton of people to this project, and I'm going to unlock a lot of value, right? So the risk reward, the risk really gets boxed and much more contained, and the reward is significantly higher.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Makes sense. And what do you think the future of no code might look like? Do you think that's going to be affected by AI developments? Like everyone's like, I remember reading as a statistic the other day, like Google saying that maybe something like 50%, some figure like that, of their code is written by AI. And I'm thinking, it looks like no code and AI might be a very good match. And other than that, I also wanted to ask you how do you think this affects your industry, right? Because finance is
Yeah.
very specialized. So I think this could work up to a point, and then there's a point where you have to add regulation and
Yeah.
knowledge about the industry into the mix.
Yeah, you said it at the end, right? Like regulation, it's always going to be a little bit of that speed bump in terms of how you can adopt. At the end of the day, you need to be able to explain why you said yes or no to a customer. It needs to be consistent, right? Like, at least in the context of the US, like as if you say yes to an identical person, should always say yes unless like you run out of capital, right? But like same thing for no's, right? You need to be able, uh, all things being equal, a no should be a no across the board, right? So
Mhm,
if you have idiosyncratic issues with like an AI that cannot really explain why it made the decision, or you just explain it differently in a way that like regulators can uh, get back, get your back,
mm,
that'll be an issue. But I do think that like if you're not using AI too, your competition is going to use it and it's going to outpace you,
mm,
right? So the way that we think about it is like how what's the level of comfort that our customers have with AI, and how in what categories can they apply it the most,
mhm,
right? Document creation is one of those. Document review, decision is. I still think there's some cost there, but the other, I would say the document reading, making sure that like what do you want is for more people to get a fair shot at being approved, or at least their credit be decision, right? So that's, we're all aligned on that. We're just making sure that like there's no collateral damage, or that the trade-off is significantly lower than just business as usual.
mhm, mhm, mhm. Makes sense. And in terms of AI and machine learning in general, I know that the financial services industry makes heavy use of AI and machine learning in different areas.
Yeah.
But I guess this is different from subsector to subsector. For example, hedge funds, they've been using machine learning since the
Yeah.
90s, which might not be the case for other institutions. So how do you feel developments in things like no code and large language models are going to affect this? Like, do you see in Fuse an opportunity maybe to add some capabilities like that into your product and then facilitate the adoption of machine learning and AI within the financial sector? Or you think, maybe this is still a bit too far-fetched, some of these organizations like banks,
No,
they're maybe too archaic or yeah.
no, we use it, right? Like
Mhm,
we use it in a way that our customers feel comfortable with, right? Like, and we walk in lockstep with them in terms of like showing. We try to, of course, be innovative and show them what is possible. But as far as
mhm,
adoption goes, they dictate how fast they want themselves to do it, right? It's for us to educate them on the benefits and like give them kind of pros and cons of the decision of like going forward, not going forward. And that's what we do best, right? Like being able to like show them this is all the cool things you can unlock. Um,
mhm,
these are like some of the risks, but from a if and this is how we think that you'll mitigate the risks. So for example, document reading, right? Like just synthetic fraud. How do you think about creating memos? All of the how do you update that parts of a memo that's been written? things like that.
Hmm.
That's already like something that can get done, right? And it's spreading through documentation, like it's commercial lending. All of that is something that we see the application being it's already happening or it's imminent.
And do you see any differences between the subsectors in finance, like on
Yeah,
personal
of
experience in
course.
terms of adoption? Like
Yeah.
which ones are the most forward thinking? Which ones are the most difficult to work with?
It's not like forward thinking. It's just like if you're more regulated, you're just more scared, right?
Makes sense.
I mean, it's not even scared. It's just you're constrained, right? Consumer lending in general, just a ton of regulation. Mortgages, there's a ton of regulation, right? I mean, everyone, if you're over 30, you still remember the financial crisis, right? So there's a
I do.
yeah. So you probably you do remember how that felt, right? Like that
Yeah,
it felt
100%.
pretty cataclysm, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of that regulation came after that, right? So
Mm.
um and times have changed, right? So maybe they need a review. Who knows? I am not a lawmaker, but uh in all the categories of lending, just when you think about private capital, right? Like you've seen just the banks feeling a lot of the pressure of this no bank lenders that like have
Mhm.
different the type of regulation, and they can uh they 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 can lend with less restrictions than others, of course, because they have instead of lending with deposits, they're lending via LPs, right? So
Mhm.
but ultimately, as a lot of the businesses that lending businesses the banks used to do used to be run by banks are moving to like private funds. Those private funds are going to find themselves realizing, listen, this cannot be done by people either. I mean, we're just shifting the manual work from banks to like credit funds, and those credit funds are going to have to find ways to automate that process because the process itself is pretty tedious, right? So how can they do
Mm.
it in a way that it's more automated, right? So and make the lives easier of the humans that are doing that underwriting work today.
Yeah. No, I hear you. In terms of innovation, like other than AI, do you see any other trends in the financial industries?
I mean, AI is by far, but it's automation as a whole is a subset.
Hmm.
It's probably like the overarching thing here, right? Like making it easy to like the self-serve, right? Like low code, no code. That's kind of the promise that like you're less reliant on your vendors as a service provider, but more of a solve, uh, like a lot of point solutions. That kind of stuff is what we're seeing of in other corners, of course, like you're gonna talk about like blockchains and things like that, right? There's so many corners of finance, but I would say that the story of this decade and probably the next two is just how AI will become the same thing that everything became a tech company. Everyone's kind of a tech company now.
Hmm.
In 20, 30 years, I think we will see that we all need to kind of mix up our business models and see how we can adopt the AI in a way that it's accretive for our clients or for ourselves.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think automation and AI, they kind of go hand in hand in a sense, because I think what many people now call AI is a combination of large language models and
Yeah,
automation, which does feel like intelligent, you know. I mean, that's
yeah,
true. And in terms of other, let's say, areas of innovation, a lot of people are talking about Web3, crypto, things like that. Do you think there's anything there other than obviously, you know, it from
yeah.
I'm not talking about an ETF or from an investment perspective, but as a foundational technology, as a layer for financial services, do you think blockchain or Web3 is actually useful or just overhyped?
I mean, I don't have much of an opinion on Web3. They just don't know that much about it. But like,
Mm.
as far as the blockchain goes, it's an incredibly resilient story, right? Like, definitely, like the application, there's just more products and actual applications. It seems,
Mm.
and just, but we will see, right? Like, the amount of times that like I felt that that was it, that was the last nail in the coffin of this booms and bust cycles that market seems to go through, it has proven resilient, right? Like in adoption,
Mm.
there, kind of like both candidates in the prior election were kind of very warm to the industry. So it just probably like just finding the applications. I'm not in that space, so that's I wish the founders doing that the best of luck. I think that at least as the son of immigrants, uh, frictionless movement and creating the money of the internet makes a lot of sense conceptually.
Hmm.
You still need to deal with 180 plus sovereign nations and like their own set of regulations that they want to put on that. So I will let them navigate and help us find a solution for that. I'm
Hmm.
cheering for them. Conceptually, I like it. I just don't necessarily just don't use much of my bandwidth to
Hmm.
figure it out for them. I think it's the intentions are pretty, in general, quite clear to the potential. I hope they help us realize it.
Yeah, yeah, I guess there's a lot of potential, but for now it looks like a lot of it is just about investment and maybe not so much as a foundational layer. But I guess time will tell, time
Mhm.
will tell, and
Yeah.
maybe a lot of it is also related to what you mentioned earlier, like risk and regulation,
Yeah.
which that does seem to be like a bit of a challenge in anything finance related, right? And actually, I wanted
Yeah.
to ask you, as a startup, like how did you find that landscape? Did you find that regulation was like very, very difficult to navigate, or
Mm.
because of your prior experience, you
Mm.
kind of knew how to go about doing things?
Uh, I think regulation, you need to embrace it, right? In a way, it helps your business. In a way, it
Hmm.
also puts you on your feet. Our customers trust us that we are going to be like uh, knowledgeable with that and kind of help them kind of problem solve. So be it less or more regulation, your system kind of needs to be able to take that information and like help your clients not worry about that particular component, or at least worry less because they have the best system in place because you've done some of the work for
Hmm.
you. Um, that's how my general perception of regulation. Lending markets, the regulation has been there like pretty much forever, right? So or at least or since it has changed and evolved for the last 80, 100 years or more, right? Like
Hmm.
when you think about big pieces during the Great Depression, like 90s, post
Hmm.
financial crisis. So there's the landscape changes, and also this depending on administrations, you have very much more selective enforcement of rules, right? So it all comes down to not all. It doesn't always mean that the laws are changing, but also the enforceability of them might
Hmm.
change. At least in the context of the U.S.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's a very good quote. Like that, you need to embrace regulation. I guess there's no way around it.
Yeah,
And
I mean, especially for us, we cannot change it, right? Like our clients might have an ability to kind of, but we're just too small for business to like go the way, right? Like
yeah, yeah.
we just need to be adaptable to it, right? Uh, maybe one day we get to the point at which we get to dictate it in our rule in our terms, but that would be a nice problem to have. Today we just need to be the most agile at adapting it and create value for our customers that way.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, no, I hear you. And do you find that do you have any thoughts on regulation for AI or AI in the financial sector? Because obviously there's a lot of talk about AI regulations, some of which or all of these regulations might affect how you're using AI in financial services, given the gravity of that industry. So do you have a view on that?
um, on regulating AI. I mean,
Yeah, and how that's going to affect like finance as well.
I definitely like just the problem is like the real question is, do people regulating AI understand AI, right?
Yeah, good point.
Like so
I'm not so
uh
sure.
yeah, so that's that is something, right? Like um I I do trust to some extent that like whoever tries to do it is gonna do it from a good place, right? If that comes that ends up happening, I do think that transfer of knowledge of AI between nations is going to become increasingly less common
Mhm.
because that's going to become probably a competitive advantage for the. I mean, you already see it with chips here in the U.S. Um,
Yes.
talent, algorithms. Um, we'll see how the next 5, 10 years happen, but given that, especially if you get to the point of AGI, right? It just seems that it would be in your best competitive interest not to share that technology. But obviously, I'm not a game theory
Hmm.
PhD. I'm not a regulator, but from afar, when you have something that can really outpace human intelligence, you probably want to have the monopoly of that. And that, and you could be a democracy or a non-democratic country, whichever, you probably want to
Hmm.
have that. Uh, I, for the benefit of your own citizens, you probably want to have that genie in your bottle. That's
Yeah,
just my two
yeah,
cents on that.
makes perfect sense. And in terms of, this is going to be the last question for today. In terms of advice for other innovators in the financial sector, and entrepreneurs that want to create a new business in this space, what advice would you give them? Or like, if you could go back a few years in the past and advise like your younger self, like what would that advice be?
I think it evolves with like something that I think speaking with my mother over the weekend, it's just patience, right? Like just
Mm,
everything ends up taking way more. It's very important to be impatient to make things happen. But had you told me like 5 years ago when I started this business, like I think like your initial view is like this is going to take like 6 months. It just doesn't, right? Like what you need
mm,
to have is like a clear vision and like little by little realize on it and put deadlines, right? Like for me, for example, it was very important to kind of realize by this date I want to have an idea. So that gives
yeah.
discipline, right? So you set kind of benchmarks and milestones you want to achieve, but kind of this vision that like the broader thing of what the company is going to become, and then you're going to be Mark Zuckerberg within a year. That's wishful thinking. It's a nice thing to have. It probably gives us cozy feelings and comfort, but it just takes more time, right? So definitely could go through the walls and like work hard and like, but uh, be patient in the sense that strategically patient. Like little by little, it would happen.
Hmm.
Just the reason why Mark Zuckerberg or like some of these guys are so impressive is because they're just unicorns on their own as humans, right? So
Yeah.
it's nice to believe that to have that kind of fantasy that perhaps you're one of them. Most likely you're not, right? But even if you're not,
Yeah.
even if you're a fraction of what they are, you're going to live a very good life. So don't worry about it, type of thing.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. That's some solid piece of advice. I like this message. And one final thing, where can people learn more about Fuse and you personally? Website, LinkedIn?
Yeah. You can fusefinance.com. That's our website. And please add me on LinkedIn. Happy to return the favor in terms of I've had great mentors in the past. So if I can spend paid forward, I'll do it. So thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you, Andre. It's been a pleasure.